Hey, we're in the midst of a series on local Southern Indiana bloggers, YouTubers, and social media influencers. And so, with that in mind, we have Jessica McCollum on with us today. Jessica, thank you for joining us.
Oh, no problem. Happy to be here.
Hey, so your channel, you have a YouTube channel. It's called From Dream to Seed. So walk us through what your channel is about, and I have to imagine that there's some meaning behind that name.
Um, Probably is not as much as you think. I grew up in a family of backyard gardeners, so that's something that I grew up with. And then I went to nursing school, and in the few years that I worked as a nurse, I became really interested in how food can affect our health, in particular vegetables and fruits. So when I had children of my own, I always planned on having a garden, but it became very a very motivating factor to have them involved in growing their own fruits and vegetables and then hopefully eating more of them. So that's kind of how it started as far as my own personal garden. And true to my nature, I just love all things science and education. So I just kind of dove in head first as far as the science behind it and how to improve my own garden. Um, then I created my Facebook page from Dream to Seed mainly because I felt like people were tired of me blowing up my regular Facebook page with pictures of my garden. So I created that page just as simply a way to share those pictures. Then during the pandemic, a lot of people just became really interested in home gardening, whether it was just for something to do or they had concerns about kind of the economy at the time. And it kind of became overwhelming in the amount of questions that I was getting asked. And I felt a need to help people. So that's when I created the YouTube channel and then the subsequent social media accounts as a way to kind of reach more people.
Yeah.
And the name, really, that was just kind of the thing. I feel like I get a lot of gardeners that are like, oh, one day when I have land, or one day, they have this dream of having a garden, but
Uh-huh.
I wanted kind of to meet people where they are and realize that they can start that right now.
Yeah, yeah. So you said where they are, right? Meet them where they are. Tell us what's so unique about where your garden is.
So I definitely live in a very typical, I think, suburban neighborhood. And I think people think they need a lot of land to start a garden or even just a yard period. And you don't. That's one of the goals of my channel is don't wait until, you have your dream homestead or whatever it is that you think you need to start a garden. Start now. We have things like container gardening and hydroponics and aeroponics and even indoor growing systems now that can really help you garden in whatever situation you're in. And at the very least, you're starting that learning process because obviously gardening has a huge learning curve, I think, for most people. So if anything, you're just kind of gaining that experience
Mhm.
and any plant we grow, whether it's fruit, flower, vegetable is good for
Yeah.
us for the environment. So definitely start where you are. But yeah, I'm definitely a suburban backyard gardener.
And what is the size of your yard?
So I have almost a half acre lot. So I would say I have a fairly large, I guess, lot, maybe compared to some, maybe not for others. But I actually only garden on a small area. I think
Yeah.
my total as far as my raised beds, my vegetable garden is only like 300 square feet. So it's not huge. And I am gardening on other parts, but you don't need a huge space to grow a lot of food.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you recently did a video where you introduced yourself and kind of did a garden walkthrough. It's amazing with that small amount. And again, half acre, your house sits on part of it, and
Mhm.
then you're only farming a little bit, but you produce a just an incredible variety of things. I want to talk to you about that. But certainly you mentioned the learning curve, and your channel really seems to be designed to help people shorten that learning curve. So if you want to give it a try, we'll link to it so you can go see that. But talk to us about the variety of things that you're growing on your garden.
Well, it just started with basic vegetables and fruits, tomatoes and, squash and things like that. As we this was at a previous home. When we moved to this home and we had some more space, I definitely expanded. We started with 3 raised beds and I could grow quite a bit, but realized I couldn't grow as much as I wanted to, mainly just because I wanted to learn how to grow lots of different things.
Yeah.
So we expanded to 11 raised beds. And I also have some in-ground berry beds. So I grow tons of fruits and vegetables. I don't grow every fruit and vegetable every year. I like to experiment with different fruits and vegetables. I grow berries. I have a pollinator garden where I focus a lot on native plants and plants that are beneficial to both pollinators and beneficial wildlife like birds. Um, I also have an aeroponic garden that I grow tomatoes in. I also have container gardens and I also grow indoors. I start most of my seedlings inside, so I do grow indoors as well. This year, I actually focused a lot on flowers, which is something I haven't done in the past. Cut flower gardens are a huge thing right now, and I didn't have a ton of experience, like practical experience in it. So this year, I cut back on the vegetables, which was painful because that's kind of my jam. That's that's what I do. But I really focus on growing a lot of flowers, cut flowers, so that when people have those questions, I'm able to answer them.
Yeah. And it seems like you put a lot of thought into the design and the layout of your garden. Again, that walkthrough you did is you've got fence row and then you've got the raised beds. Is that's part of the joy and the passion for you is kind of figuring out the mechanics of it?
Yeah. I definitely spend a good solid week at the beginning of every growing season kind of planning because what's nice now and the things that we've learned with things like vertical gardening and companion planting, if you do it right, you can fit a lot of things in a small space by growing taller things vertically and then growing, shorter things underneath. And not only is it allowing you to grow more things in a smaller space, but it's actually more beneficial for the plants to sometimes grow that way. So yeah, it's definitely kind of a science. And you're kind of designing ways to fit the most in a small space.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. And your channel is really education focused, it seems. You're in the midst of a series called Friend or Foe, where you unpack the bugs and teach us about that, how you treat them. So it's a great channel. You've built an audience, over 1,500 followers at this point. What are some of the most common questions that you get from your followers?
Um, Mostly they want to know why a certain crop failed.
Hmm.
And the truth is, just like people, every plant is completely different in what it likes. And there's very few like hard, fast gardening rules that apply to everything. And then you mix in the fact that everyone's growing space is different. Their weather, their growing zones, meaning the temperatures that they deal with, the pest pressures and the disease pressures that they get are completely different. So, what works in my garden may not work in theirs, or what works great in theirs may not work in mine. So I try to keep that in mind. But I would say I tell people one of the best things that you can do is not to create healthy plants, it's to create healthy soil.
Mm.
So I put a lot of effort into building up my soil. And by doing that, my plants are healthier, which means less disease and sometimes less pests, not always.
Hmm.
Um, Less fertilizers and things that I have to use. And again, I'm creating compost at home to also help improve that soil. So I would definitely recommend that you really focus on building up that soil rather than just kind of, I live in a neighborhood. I have that typical no topsoil,
Yeah.
dirt, clay, dirt. If I go and try to just stick vegetables in the ground, they're not going to grow well.
Yeah.
So I took the time to really build up that soil in preparation for planting. The other one is, when I first started gardening, my philosophy was if I can't eat it, I'm not going to grow it. And unfortunately, it's just not a good way to think. And I've since learned um, the importance of planting things for the pollinators because it benefits your own garden to have those pollinators, especially the bees. You're going to get better fruit and vegetable yields, but how important it is for the environment. So I tell people a lot, if you're just landscaping or you're wanting to put in a flower bed for the pollinators, like choose native plants. That's a big thing right now, and how much the native plants in your area support the ecology in your area.
Yeah. Yeah. Jessica McCollum from Dream to Seed YouTube channel. Jessica, again, you're have the channel. It seems like you're very passionate about what you do. You've built a great following. Um, what kind of tips would you have for this time of year? We're uh, midsummer heading into fall. Are there any tips that you think would be helpful for folks right now?
I would say, we live in an area that has a really long growing season, which is great. So a lot of people think gardening is just a spring, summer thing. And in our area, it's definitely a well into fall thing. So fall gardens, in fact, there's some plants that I only grow in the fall because they grow better than any other time. So, use those months, use your season to the fullest and plant some things in the fall. I would say, again, if you're planning on starting a garden next year, this is the time to start adding some compost, maybe adding some cover crops to your garden bed to kind of prep that soil to be a much better growing environment for the spring.
You
Okay.
have you're living in a subdivision, right? So a small area. What do your neighbors think?
Well, I bribe them with free produce, so no,
Ah,
that's partly true. No, actually, most of my neighbors in my nearest neighbors have gardens, not quite as extensive as mine, but no, most of them actually have gardens. I think it's really becoming something that's becoming more popular. That's kind of getting back to having these kitchen gardens.
yeah.
I would say, because I deal with HOA like a lot of people do. I wouldn't say deal. I have an HOA.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I have some limits in what I can do, and that's fine. And that's what I want people to know is there's a way to garden in just about any situation you're in.
Mhm.
You don't need to uproot your whole lifestyle just to have a garden. But yeah, start where you are. There's lots of options for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But
Well,
yeah.
and that's what I was going to ask you as well is, you got somebody that says, "Look, my yard's not big enough, or I'm not a gardener. I don't know how to do this." Is that the tip? Start where you are.
Yeah, I get a lot of, "Oh, I would love to do this, but I just have a black thumb." And I say, "Oh, you don't have a black thumb. You just don't know enough yet, or you need
Right.
more practice." Because the truth is, I've been gardening for almost 15 years. I've been a master gardener with Purdue Extension for 2 years, and I still kill plants
Yeah,
every year.
yeah,
It's just a part. It's kind of like, that's what I tell people. I'm like, if you think you're going to go into having a garden and you're not going to kill a plant, it's like thinking you're going to get a home run every time you get up to bat. You're going to fail at something every year, and sometimes it's not even your fault. It's
yeah,
just the weather or
yeah,
pests that year.
yeah,
Learn from it, apply what you've learned the next year, because that's how I got where I am, is by failures in the garden and doing it better the next year.
yeah. Well, if you're a master gardener or thinking about starting gardening, Jessica McCollum's channel From Dream to Seed is a great place to start. She's going to help you, educate you on plants and pests and the pollinators, and help you kickstart. Jessica, what is your hope? What is your dream for the channel? What do you hope that people take away from it?
Um, Definitely education. That's the main focus of my channel. Just again, meeting people where they are. I just wanted, there's a lot of gardening information out there, and it can be really overwhelming
Mhm.
when you first start to garden. So I teach people to start small, start with a couple of your favorite plants. Um, and I try really hard on my channel to teach with the beginning gardener in mind. Literally, if you've never even put a seed in dirt before, or soil. So I focus a lot on that beginning gardener, and I want to create a space where people feel comfortable asking maybe questions that they think might be silly or common knowledge, because they're not to everyone. So that's my hope for the channel, is just to create an environment where we can just focus on a lot of gardeners. If you have a huge multiple acre garden, great. But I think I focus more on this, your typical backyard kind of gardener, which is, that's what I am. I'm not a farmer. I'm not, I'm not even a homesteader. I just am, but I have a kitchen garden, something that families and women in particular have been doing for centuries. So that's kind of what I want to get back to, is this kitchen garden, and definitely letting people know that you can start right now.
Yeah. Well, when we kicked off the series, we were looking for local people, but we wanted people that were adding value back to the Southern Indiana community. You're definitely doing that. You've got short form videos, long form videos, everything in between, and your passion for it really shines through. So thank you for doing it. Thanks for the channel, and thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.